racist judge tries to intimidate Black Teen. But the boy's first words shake the courtroom. A black teenage boy, dressed in a crisp white shirt, walked into the federal courtroom. No lawyer by his side. No family was seated in the gallery. Not a single tremble. Amid eyes filled with scrutiny, contempt, and doubt, only his gaze remained unnervingly calm. Up high on the bench sat a white judge, Arthur Beckley, notorious for his harsh rulings against young black defendants, who smirked, leaned forward, and spoke with scorn. "You think this is a TV drama? Court's not a stage for kids like you to perform." A scattered chuckle came from the prosecution's side. The gavel struck the desk. No one spoke up in the boy's defense. Until the teen opened his mouth, only the very first sentence left his lips, and the entire courtroom fell into utter silence. No one could believe what they'd just heard. Even the judge himself jolted upright in his chair. "You're watching Black Strength stories, where buried truths come to light, and justice always has a voice. Let us know where you're watching from. And don't take your eyes off the screen, because what's about to unfold will make you question everything hidden beneath the American justice system." Jayden Lewis, 17 years old, honors student at Lincoln High School in Georgia. GPA 3.9, captain of the debate team, state champion in the Future Lawyers of America competition. That same boy, just a week ago still working on his full-ride college scholarship application, now sat in the defendant's seat. The incident occurred on March 12th at 6:42 p.m., right outside the Halberton Food Mart. Jayden had just stepped out after buying bread and milk for his grandmother. Two officers, Officer Kent and Officer McHale, stopped him and demanded to search his bag. "There's been a theft in the area. Quite the coincidence, huh?" One officer sneered, hand resting on his weapon. Jayden, confused but calm, raised his hands, exactly as every black child in America is taught. Don't move. Don't talk back. Don't give them a reason. But when one officer stepped forward and touched him, Jayden instinctively lifted his arms to shield his face. That was it. One single motion. In the official report, they wrote, "Subject exhibited aggressive behavior, resisted lawful authority, and posed a threat to officer safety." He was shoved onto the pavement, handcuffed in front of passing pedestrians. No explanation given. And just like that, a teenager with no criminal record, no weapon, no threats, was suddenly charged with felony assault against law enforcement, a charge that carries a potential sentence of 5 to 15 years in prison if convicted. The local community couldn't afford a high-profile attorney. Jayden's grandmother, Ms. Elsie, 71 years old, surviving on less than $1,200 a month in Social Security, could only hold his hand in the interrogation room. Court-appointed counsel? None was provided. The DA's office claimed the subject requested to represent himself. The truth? Jayden was never asked. This wasn't rare. According to ACLU data, just last year, nearly 13,000 black minors were charged with high-level offenses, despite insufficient evidence. Over 60% of them had no access to legal counsel at the outset. Jayden was one of them. But unlike many, Jayden knew the law. He wasn't raised to bow his head. He was raised to stand tall, speak clearly, and never let anyone twist the truth. And today, in the Midlands County courtroom, Jayden walked in alone. No mother. She had passed away 3 years ago from late-stage cancer. Just him in a neatly ironed old shirt, holding a thin folder compiled entirely by himself over 4 days at the public library. Upon the bench, Judge Arthur Beckley looked down and prepared to crush him as he had done with so many other young black men before. But this time, Jayden hadn't come to bow. He had come to argue. And in just a few minutes, Jayden would silence the entire courtroom with a single sentence. That day, the hearing was scheduled on the docket for 8 a.m., but it wasn't until 8:53 that Judge Arthur Beckley finally appeared, clad in his black robe, his eyes cold, and his face void of expression. He entered to the sound of papers rustling and wooden chairs lightly scraping against the stone floor. Some in the courtroom already knew his name, not because of fairness, but because of a legacy tainted by decades of controversy. Arthur L. Beckley, 64 years old, had been a county judge since 1998, a Harvard graduate, former federal prosecutor. Outsiders called him the Iron Judge, but within many black communities across the Midlands and Delacroix regions, he carried another nickname, the Sentencer in a Robe. According to records from the Midlands District Justice Oversight Organization, over the past 10 years, he handled 128 juvenile cases involving youth of color. 113 of those ended in the maximum sentence. At least 9 racial bias complaints had been filed, 3 of which came from former public defenders. And most telling, not a single case was tried before a jury with more than one black member. When Jayden Lewis's name was called, he stepped forward. The entire courtroom stared at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. No lawyer, no family, just a child standing before the cold machine of justice. "You're representing yourself?" Beckley asked, his tone smooth like a blade on paper. Jayden nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Oh, well, isn't that delightful?" Beckley interrupted, sarcasm thinly veiled. "You here to rap? This is a courtroom, not the Bronx sidewalk." No one laughed, just a few sideways glances. The court clerk blinked. A reporter slightly lifted their recorder. Jayden stood still. No reaction. No bowed head. No snarky reply. He simply kept his calm gaze fixed on the man who wielded power to mock him. Beckley tapped his gavel lightly. "You'd better keep it short. I don't have time for some teen speech hoping to go viral on TikTok." The prosecutor recited the indictment like an old dusty script. The defendant exhibited conduct, resisting lawful enforcement, with the potential to inflict harm upon the officer. We request prosecution under Section 16.2.4, Clause C, behavior endangering a law enforcement official. No evidence of injury, no witnesses other than the officers. Body cam footage? Cited, but does not depict events before defendant's restraint. Jayden remained silent until Beckley stared directly at him, eyes sharp as steel. "You have 3 minutes. Don't waste my time. And don't think this is some inspirational movie." A faint tick echoed from the old clock on the wall. Everyone thought, this boy will stammer or say nothing at all. But what no one expected was that those 3 minutes would become the moment that shook the very system Beckley thought he controlled. 8:59 a.m. Just 6 minutes after Jayden stood before the bench, the trial was rushed forward at an abnormal pace. No deliberation, no due process in examining evidence. Everything unfolded like a performance of power, dressed up as justice. The prosecutor, Natalie Crickland, previously accused of deliberately suppressing evidence in a case last year, stepped forward and coldly stated, "Your Honor, we have surveillance footage from the scene. The video clearly shows the defendant acting dangerously, forcing Officer McHale to use physical restraint." The screen flickered on. The video clip lasted only 23 seconds. It had no sound, no timestamp, only the image of Jayden raising his hands and then being slammed to the ground. Jayden immediately raised his hand. "Your Honor, I would like to respond," Beckley interrupted. "Do you have another version of the footage? No? Then sit down." The courtroom erupted in faint laughter. A few shook their heads in disbelief, but most remained silent. Jayden clenched his teeth. No lawyer, no chance for cross-examination, no one to stand in his defense. All that remained was him, a 17-year-old boy staring down a courtroom designed to swallow his future whole. Beckley leaned on the bench, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, let me guess. You watch a lot of TV and think you can play lawyer, huh? Or maybe you're rehearsing for Harvard Law School." Someone behind chuckled. Beckley raised an eyebrow. "Another future black lawyer, is that it?" Jayden said nothing. No reaction. But in his mind were hundreds of hours spent studying law at the city library. Dozens of past rulings signed by Beckley, all of which Jayden had researched. And a counter-offensive plan written with the tears and fury of countless generations. In a moment that seemed powerless, Jayden lifted his head and looked the judge square in the eyes. "I may represent myself, but I also have the right to access the full, unedited version of that footage. By law, I'm entitled to request unaltered evidence, am I not?" Beckley narrowed his eyes. The clerk appeared unsure. The prosecutor frowned. Jayden continued, this time clearer, firmer. "The Sixth Amendment, Section 1. The accused has the right to confront witnesses and examine all evidence used to prosecute them. If the court denies that, then this proceeding is no longer lawful." The entire room fell silent for several seconds. The stenographer began typing more slowly. Even Beckley, a man known for striking first, started to hesitate. According to the Justice Project, up to 72% of juvenile cases in southern states are pushed through in under 20 minutes, especially if the defendant is a person of color with no legal counsel. And Jayden had just begun dismantling that machine. That 17-year-old boy, though standing alone, had just forced the most powerful figure in the courtroom to take one step back. And that was only the beginning. 9:07 a.m. Jayden took a deep breath. He gently touched the thin file in his hands, typed by himself, printed at the public library just days earlier. "Your Honor, stop!" Beckley's voice rang out, firm, without even looking at him. "Don't try to give a speech. Just answer the question. Do you admit to resisting the officer?" Jayden stayed composed. "I only want to explain what happened because—" "No, because!" Beckley barked, cutting him off a second time. "You're not here to teach me the law." A faint echoed from the audience seats. Jayden stood his ground. "I'm not teaching anyone. I just want to—" "I said enough!" Beckley slammed his gavel louder this time. "Spare us the YouTube theatrics. In here, I make the rules." The air in the courtroom grew suffocating. Prosecutor Crickland smiled and tilted her head, as if savoring the moment a child was crushed, word by word. Jayden pressed his lips together. He felt it. They weren't afraid of him. They saw him as a joke. Beckley leaned in, voice sharp like a blade. "You have 30 seconds. No philosophy. No arguments. Answer directly. If not, I'll take it as non-cooperation." A minute passed in Jayden's mind, like a blade stuck in bone. Then he lifted his head, staring straight into the judge's eyes. No fear. No retreat. And he spoke, the words that froze the entire courtroom. "Your Honor, do you always interrupt minors without legal representation? Or just the black ones?" The silence exploded. The typing stopped. Someone coughed, startled by their own. The prosecutor turned to Beckley, eyes wide. The court clerk awkwardly looked down at the transcript, her hand trembling. Beckley glared, face flushed red. He raised the gavel, pounding it repeatedly. "Order! Order! You're abusing your privilege to stand before this court." Jayden didn't back down. He stepped in further. "I may be 17, but I know my rights. And I know yours too. You can silence me with a gavel, sir, but you can't silence the truth. At this point, you don't need to imagine. Right then, a journalist from the Herald Midlands captured the entire exchange on camera. Less than 24 hours later, the 29-second clip was posted online and reached over 3.4 million views. According to the Law Review Journal 2023, up to 52% of trials involving black youth include at least 2 verbal interruptions by the judge per session, and in 74% of those cases, the judges were never reprimanded. Jayden had just done what the system had tried to bury for over 30 years. He named the discrimination, right in front of the one enforcing it. And for the first time, no one could wrap it up quickly. 9:11 a.m. After the question that froze the entire courtroom in the previous part, Jayden Lewis didn't just make Judge Beckley blush. He began to counterattack using what no one believed he possessed: sharp legal knowledge. The courtroom remained taut like a tightened string. Beckley struck his gavel, demanding Jayden stop speaking, but this time, his voice lacked the confidence it once had. Jayden took a breath, then slowly read aloud. In Gideon v. Wainwright, 372 U.S. 335, 1963, the United States Supreme Court ruled that states are required to provide legal counsel to defendants unable to afford their attorneys under the Sixth Amendment. No one in the courtroom expected it. A 17-year-old kid from the poorest neighborhood in the city, reciting, word for word, the case name, citation, year, and the precise ruling of a landmark Supreme Court decision. The court clerk, silent until now, suddenly leaned over her desk and began typing quickly into her laptop. Prosecutor Natalie Crickland turned to her assistant and whispered, "Where the hell did he get that from?" Jayden didn't stop. He stepped closer to the bench and declared boldly, "Under the Sixth Amendment, all defendants have the right to legal assistance when prosecuted criminally. Forcing me to represent myself without ever receiving a written waiver of legal counsel is a direct violation of that right. And under Midlands Penal Code Section 14.6, such violation renders the initial arraignment process unlawful." The courtroom began to murmur. Older attendees turned to whisper, "Who is this kid?" A man in a blazer, a reporter from the Midlands Observer, started flipping his notebook, scribbling notes non-stop. And Beckley. He wasn't striking the gavel anymore. No more mockery. Just silence, staring at Jayden as if looking at something beyond his control. According to data from the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, only 17% of high school students know their legal rights upon arrest, and less than 1% can correctly cite specific amendments or precedents. Jayden Lewis didn't just know them, he had them memorized. Beckley abruptly turned to the clerk. "Verify the defendant's information. Call the court legal advisory." The clerk nodded slightly. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Crickland began quietly gathering her files, an unusual gesture, almost like preparing for an unscripted scenario. After nearly a minute of silence, Beckley was forced to announce, "The court will recess for 10 minutes to verify the legal content presented by the defendant." It was the first time in his 19 years on the bench Arthur Beckley had to pause a trial because of a teenager representing himself. Chairs shifted. The door opened. People in the courtroom began murmuring, faint phrases echoing. Where did that kid learn the law? Was he trained for this? He acts like the judge is the one who has to listen to him. An elderly woman, Mrs. Elsie, Jayden's grandmother, sitting quietly at the very back, began to cry. But not out of fear. For the first time, she saw her grandson stand like a man, right in the place meant to break him. 9:24 a.m. Just minutes after Judge Beckley was forced to recess the court to verify the legal argument, the courtroom doors opened once again. But this time, it wasn't the clerk, or a lawyer, or even a reporter who stepped in. It was a tall black man with salt and pepper hair, wearing a gray suit, eyes sharp with quiet authority. He walked directly toward the witness box, pulled out a leather wallet, and placed his ID card in front of the security officer. It read, Raymond Ellis, J.D. Professor of Constitutional Law, Stanford University. Academic Director, National Pre-Law Program, NPLP. A wave of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Reporters raised their cameras. The stenographer stopped typing. Beckley frowned. Who is this guest? Professor Ellis approached the bench. He didn't ask for permission, didn't wait to be invited. He simply stood there like an immovable wall. Your Honor, I'm here as the academic supervisor of Jayden Lewis. He is an outstanding pre-law scholar in our accelerated program, one designed for high school students with exceptional legal aptitude. Beckley froze, not because of the title, but because of the name. Raymond Ellis, the same man once invited to lecture at the Eastern District Federal Court, the same man who authored the judicial training material for the very course Beckley took 14 years ago. The professor continued, Jayden won first place in last year's National Constitutional Studies competition. He was honored by the National Bar Association for his essay on constitutionality and juvenile legal representation. If this court is unaware of who he is, perhaps that reflects a flaw in the system, not in Jayden. According to data from the National Future Legal Minds program, only 0.03% of high school students in the U.S. have ever been invited into Stanford's pre-law research initiative. In the past 5 years, only 7 black students nationwide made it past the final round. Jayden was the youngest among them. The courtroom froze. Even Prosecutor Crickland flipped through the case file, whispering to her assistant. This wasn't in the original records. Who filtered that out? Beckley sat in silence. For the first time during the entire trial, he had no response. And Jayden? He simply nodded respectfully to the professor, not with pride, not with arrogance. It was that very calmness that made the entire courtroom begin to reflect on itself. Professor Ellis turned toward the bench. If this justice system is shaped by silencing the voices of those who understand the law better than the ones sentencing them, then perhaps we are trying the wrong person. 9:38 a.m. After the true identity of Jayden Lewis was revealed, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted entirely. Professor Raymond Ellis, the towering figure of Stanford constitutional law, had just confirmed that the 17-year-old boy wasn't just a high school student. He was a pre-law scholar in one of the most prestigious national legal programs. Now, every eye in the courtroom, including those who once sneered, was fixed on Jayden. No more ridicule. No more interruptions. Beckley, still seated atop the bench, tapped his gavel lightly. Defendant, if you have anything to present, I will allow you to use this time. Jayden nodded, but instead of stepping straight to the stand, he opened his worn backpack, pulled out a USB drive, and handed it to the courtroom technician. I would like to present visual evidence, the full unedited security footage from Halberton Food Mart, provided directly by the store owner. The entire room froze. Crickland, the prosecutor, flinched. The court did not receive this footage previously, Jayden replied calmly. I emailed it to the prosecution at 11:42 p.m. last night, with a digital receipt of delivery. According to Midland state regulations, any evidence submitted before midnight on the eve of trial is admissible, unless a formal objection is filed. And Jayden knew that. The screen lit up. The footage began to play. Not just 23 seconds like the prosecution had shown, but 3 minutes and 42 seconds, with full audio, timestamp, and contextual clarity. The video showed Jayden exiting the store. Officers intercepted him. Jayden raised both hands, offering no resistance. One officer grabbed his sleeve. Jayden took a half step back, raised his arm to shield his face, and was slammed to the pavement. No threats, no aggression, only the instinctual fear of a child who knew he was being targeted. Jayden turned to the court, his voice clear and unwavering. My actions were not aggressive. I responded the way every black child is taught to when stopped by police. Don't resist, don't run, don't lie. I wasn't just handcuffed. I was charged for existing in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and in the wrong skin. He pulled out a folder. Under Section 22.4 of the Midland Security Statute, charges of assaulting an officer require two elements: an active threat and a resulting injury or obstruction. Neither element appears in this footage. The courtroom was silent. Beckley looked down at the files, but found no rebuttal. Jayden stepped closer to the stand, eyes locked forward, his voice lower, but each word cutting through the courtroom like steel. Justice doesn't depend on your robe, your skin, or your status. It depends on the truth. A moment of silence hung in the air like a vacuum. Then suddenly, applause erupted. A reporter stood up, scribbling frantically. Courtroom moment of truth. Must publish. When the hearing ended, Jayden left the courthouse under a flood of stunned, respectful, and even grateful gazes. But the shockwave he unleashed extended far beyond that high-ceilinged room, with wooden walls and fluorescent lights. Less than an hour later, the clip capturing Jayden's rebuttal and statement spread across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, with headlines like, 17-year-old black teen shuts down, racist judge in viral courtroom moment. Justice doesn't wear a robe. Black teen exposes courtroom bias. Courtroom erupts after teen drops truth bomb on judge. Within 6 hours, the video reached 9.1 million views, becoming the #1 trending video in the US on YouTube. The hashtag #Jayden Lewis exploded across social media. That night, CNN's The Daily Brief broke in with an emergency report. 17-year-old turns the courtroom upside down and may trigger a federal investigation. The next morning, 9:12 a.m., the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, issued an official statement demanding a full review of all rulings made by Judge Arthur Beckley over the past decade. Soon after, the NAACP, Human Rights Watch, and the Southern Poverty Law Center all submitted joint petitions to the U.S. Department of Justice. We're not just witnessing bias in a single courtroom, the NAACP's statement read. We're witnessing a system where a judge becomes an instrument of oppression rather than a guardian of justice. The Department of Justice could no longer ignore it. Within just 72 hours, the DOJ's Office of Justice and Civil Rights announced a formal inquiry titled, Initiating Review of 178 Judicial Decisions Made by Judge Beckley in Minority Juvenile Cases from 2009 to 2024. A staggering number. Out of those 178 cases, 164 defendants were Black or Latinx. Among them, 95% had no legal representation at their initial hearing. Alarmingly, 72% received maximum sentencing, even though over 1/3 of those cases lacked clear physical evidence. Investigative journalists joined in. The New York Times, Washington Post, Vice, and ProPublica all published exposés on Beckley's history. They uncovered 3 previous cases flagged for judicial bias that were internally suppressed, 2 public defenders who filed complaints but then abruptly resigned, and a lower court judge whose identity remains undisclosed, who reportedly recorded Beckley making racially charged remarks in chambers. Public outrage erupted. A protest gathered outside the Midlands District Courthouse with banners reading, "We are all Jayden. Truth over robes. Beckley must fall." Protesters carried signs, gave speeches, and live-streamed on social media. A new hashtag emerged. #Indict the judge #. Beckley remained silent. No press conference, no statement. But his silence could not save the collapsing system he once ruled. An internal inquiry was launched within the Midland State Judiciary itself, and the chief judge of the appellate court convened an emergency meeting. According to leaked sources, Beckley may face permanent suspension or even criminal charges for systematic abuse of power. 7 days after the trial, Jayden Lewis sat in front of the CBS morning camera with his grandmother Elsie beside him, her face emotional yet full of pride. Behind the scenes, hashtags were still exploding like fireworks. Justice for Jayden Fortier. Judge Beckley. Removed. Some other teen hero. The year across town, at the Midland State Court of Appeals, a historic decision was announced. Judge Arthur Beckley was suspended indefinitely. The Federal Office of Civil Rights and Justice officially charged him with abuse of power, procedural violations, and systemic racial discrimination. According to the DOJ's report, Beckley had breached at least 19 professional ethics codes and now faced 2 federal criminal charges for evidence tampering and excessive sentencing without a legal basis. On the same day, the Midlands District Court declared all charges against Jayden Lewis null and void. The official document read, "No elements constituting a criminal offense. Initial proceedings violated the defendant's right to legal representation under the 6th Amendment." Jayden didn't cry. He simply nodded and gently squeezed his grandmother's hand. A boy who had once been slammed onto a sidewalk for nothing more than a prejudiced glance now stood as a victor, without needing a gavel or a robe. An even more powerful twist came 48 hours later. Harvard University announced it was awarding Jayden Lewis the Public Justice Leadership Grant, an honorary scholarship worth $340,000, given to exceptional students who have made a societal impact before the age of 18. Professor Raymond Ellis shared, "Jayden isn't just an outstanding student. He's living proof that understanding can dismantle a power structure centuries in the making." An exclusive 60 Minutes interview aired that weekend. Jayden sat quietly, his hand resting lightly on the old file folder he had once brought to court. The host asked, "Do you think you've won?" Jayden smiled softly. "At first, I just wanted to speak the truth. But now I understand. Truth alone isn't enough. People also need to be willing to listen. I just wanted the truth. But now I see I also needed them to listen." Within just 24 hours, the interview clip hit 35.4 million views on YouTube, ranking as the #1 global trending video. The title, "Black Teen Who Shook the Courtroom Speaks Out. Jayden Lewis's First Words After Freedom." At the same time, the Midland State Judicial Ethics Committee expanded its investigation to include 14 other judges with histories of biased rulings over the past decade. A full-scale reform of the juvenile court system began. Each of those changes bore the imprint of the boy who had once been wrongfully charged just under 2 weeks earlier. At a TEDx conference in Chicago, Jayden was invited to speak as the youngest keynote speaker in its history. He ended his talk with the very sentence that once rocked a courtroom. "Justice doesn't depend on your robe, your skin, or your status. It depends on the truth, and on whether we're brave enough to speak it." Jayden had won, but that victory wasn't his alone. It was a victory for every child who'd ever been interrupted while trying to speak the truth, for everyone ever bound by prejudice before they had a chance to be heard. 1 year after the trial that shook the entire system, the name Jayden Lewis was no longer searched under drama courtroom. It had become the symbol of the youth justice movement, a national movement launched by young people themselves to reclaim justice and redefine legal power. From 2024 to early 2025, over 137 high schools across 22 U.S. states began integrating legal literacy for youth into their core curriculum. The courses included understanding civil rights, basic legal argumentation, how to interact with law enforcement, and the structure of the juvenile justice system. The ACLU reported a 64% increase in the number of teens who knew their constitutional rights within just 9 months of the program's rollout. And the person who inspired it all was the same student who once walked into a courtroom alone, without a lawyer or an advocate, but full of logic and dignity. Jayden became the cover figure of Time magazine, with the headline, "From Defendant to Defender, Jayden Lewis and the Future of American Justice." He enrolled at Harvard Law School, but still made time to lead a free online seminar series called We Know the Law, aimed at teaching basic legal knowledge to Black students in low-income communities. At a TEDx event in Atlanta, Jayden said, "They once believed we were too young to understand the law, but they taught us the opposite, with their silence, with handcuffs, with unjust rulings. Now we speak. Now we write the rules." Then came the day the whole nation had been waiting for, the sentencing of Arthur Beckley. In April 2025, at the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Georgia, after 11 months of investigation and cross-examination of hundreds of cases, Beckley was officially sentenced to 6 years in prison for abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and violation of the constitutional rights of minority juveniles. Images of him, no longer in robes, just an aging man with his head bowed, walking out of the courtroom, appeared on thousands of front pages. No one cried. No one cheered. There was only the quiet of a society that had just learned how to correct itself. According to a report by the Equal Justice Network, the case of Jayden Lewis became a historic milestone that helped the U.S. Congress pass the 2025 Juvenile Justice Act, mandating all minors charged with a crime must have legal representation from the very first moment. All juvenile court proceedings must be fully recorded and archived for a minimum of 10 years. Judges found to have abused their authority will face criminal prosecution, ending the era of absolute judicial immunity. What do you think about this new generation of justice? Leave your thoughts below, and if you believe in the power of truth, share this story with the world. I hope you enjoyed this story. Like the video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.